Like I said, we're going to start off by talking about the basics of succession planning. So I think a lot of advisors think about succession planning as a way to take care of what I call the three big what ifs. What if I retire? What if I die? Or what if I become disabled? And I think most advisors would agree that it's very important to have a plan in place if something were to happen to you to make sure that those clients are going to be okay, right? But I know that succession planning goes much deeper than that. So let's talk about that. How would you define succession planning? What is it? What is it not?
Great question. And I'm glad we're kind of starting off with getting the vocabulary right, because a lot of times people use the terms of continuity planning and succession planning interchangeably or even to mean the same thing. So when we think of continuity planning, for example, we're talking more about what is the emergency plan in the event of death or disability. Uh, Succession, on the other hand, is much more intentional about a gradual transition of ownership of the business over time, from one generation, usually the founder, to the next generation of employees within a practice. So that's the primary difference. And I think for a lot of advisors, there's some hesitancy to do succession planning for a variety of reasons. Some of them good, some of them make believe.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
for the most part, it's a difficult topic to bring up, much like it is when advisors are dealing with their clients talking about term life insurance and estate planning.
Sure,
Like you're talking about mortality a little bit. And
sure.
so it's a difficult thing. And a lot of advisors want to die with their boots on, so to speak. And so the idea of putting together a succession plan and transitioning ownership. And then there's the financial aspects of, like, why do I want to give up any of my profit distributions to somebody else when I want to keep working for 10 more years? And there's good
Yeah,
answers to
exactly.
all those. So I'm sure we'll get into the more as we progress today.
Sure. So, that brings up an interesting topic, Scott. So why do you think it is that financial advisors have such a hard time with the concept of succession planning? I mean, is it just the fear of letting go? Something that they've worked maybe 20, 30, 40 years on, and they think of it, this is my baby. I don't want to let it go. Do you think it's I haven't found a worthy successor, or getting the succession planning done, the process of succession planning? Is it just one of those things that's kind of difficult, so we tend to push it off to the back burner? What are your thoughts on that?
D, all of the above.
Okay,
So
all right.
yeah, those are all valid reasons that we hear, or reasons given that we hear. The fear of letting go, for example, certainly something that we see. But when you look at succession plans that have been executed successfully, the letting go often ends up being a relief in many cases.
Yeah.
And it's because we're doing this gradually. That's a really key term here. This is a gradual transition of
Mm,
ownership and the ownership responsibilities. And if you
okay.
think about why most advisors got started in this business in the first place, it wasn't that they decided one day, I want to be a business owner. I'm going to
Sure.
select this career as the way in which I'm going to be a business owner. It's the other way around. They choose this career for one reason or another, decide I'm going to do this better if I go out and do it on my own and I run my own shop. So for those advisors, because running a business wasn't the first goal and the first priority,
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes that letting go can be a really positive thing, because there's a lot of junk associated with running a business that some
Hmm.
people don't like doing. It wasn't part of why they wanted to do it in the first place. Things like HR, compliance, choosing all the technology suites. There's so many different things that, you have to do in addition to being a good advisor to be a good business owner. And if you bring in a partner, sometimes you can find someone that has some skill sets that you don't have and can take some of those things off your plate,
Sure.
that even if they might not necessarily want to do those things, a second generation partner is going to have to choose to do some of those things, or they're not going to get a stake at the table in the first place. So it's a great
Right.
way to offload some of the things you don't like. So I think that fear of letting go is a little bit unfounded, and they don't
Hmm.
realize that this can be a good thing, not a bad thing. Now, if you don't have a worthy successor, that's probably the best reason not to have a formal succession plan in place. And there's a
Okay.
lot of other solutions for that. Some of them being you join up with a larger organization that might have the infrastructure, the capabilities to take those things off your plate, to free up capacity to help you go back to doing what you love to do the most, being a wealth manager for your clients. And then, over time, maybe because of that larger organization, you find someone becomes your right hand and you can do something internally, or you just ultimately sell to that larger organization that you become a part of. There are solutions to that too, but that's probably the most common one we hear, and one that is getting harder and harder because of this battle for talent that we have going on in our industry as well.
Interesting.
That third one you mentioned, though, the process being too difficult, I think that's a little bit of a myth, and it's just probably a lack of education. So I thank you for putting together this webinar to talk about this,
Yeah,
to debunk this myth that this is something that's difficult to do, because with the right partners, this can actually be a fairly seamless and really eye-opening and enlightening experience that can make the business better. So it's not something that I would deem all that difficult, but it certainly is something you want to get right, and you need to find
sure.
the right partners to help you do that.
Sure. And I would say maybe as opposed to 10, 15 years ago or so, there are so many more resources available today
Oh,
to
yeah,
advisors to get a little bit of that hand holding. Would you agree? Like with your firm, FP Transitions, or even here at Elevare, there are things that we
right.
do working with our advisors to help them through the process. So it's really not an excuse anymore to say, well, where do I get started? There's plenty of resources out there, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the landscape has changed so drastically in the last 25 years. I mean, and even after FP Transitions got founded, our founder, David Grouse Sr., literally wrote the book that's actually over my shoulder here on succession planning for financial advisors. And he wrote that book just less than 10 years ago. So
mm,
there wasn't even a good blueprint in the industry
right.
until the last decade. And then if you think about, organizations like Elevare, I mean, we didn't have an RAA that hit 100 billion in AUM until the last 10, 20 years.
That's
And now
right.
all of a sudden we've got, dozens of them that are over 100 billion, and we're on our way to having our first $1 trillion RAA probably in the
Wow.
next 10 years.
Wow.
So we're certainly seeing the trend. I think it was in 2019 that assets at the wirehouses actually fell below the assets that are at RAAs.